this heaven?
No. It's Iowa.
Jesus, that's terrible.
Hey, don't worry. I got a lot of other girls lined up. Here's some other ones. Here. All right, you go.
Ben, what cat did you strangle to get that?
Get out of here. I don't know. Find me a better scream.
You mean you didn't dub that?
No, I didn't dub it. We've been using the same scream for years.
All right, let's hear one more. That's a good scream. It's a good scream. We're talking Blowout on the Pot of Dreams.
It began with a sound that no one was ever supposed to hear.
He's the one I saw?
Yes, he says he pulled a girl out of the car.
I would like you to forget about her.
Yeah, that's what I heard just before the tire blew out. You're right, it was a shot.
He recorded a murder they say never happened.
There's still loose ends, witnesses. The girl, I've decided to terminate her. Terminate her. Terminate her.
Brian De Palma's Blowout. Now you hear it. Now you don't.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Welcome to the Pod of Dreams. Today, our episode on Blowout, we're joined by a very special guest, Chris Hewitt from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, entertainment critic, Rotten Tomatoes approved top critic. Chris, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. I'm delighted to join you.
Absolutely. So, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your work, kind of what you do for the Star-Tribune, how long you've been writing reviews.
I have been, I guess you could say, a full-time critic since '93, so for a long time. I think the first movie I reviewed was The Pelican Brief, and that was for the Pioneer Press in St. Paul, which hired me in '93. And I was there until about 5 years ago when I moved to the Star-Tribune in Minneapolis and began writing about theater, which had always been an interest too. And at the time, the Star-Tribune had a movie critic, but after a couple of years, that was no longer the case. So I took over just usually one review a week. Sometimes, I guess in the summer and Christmas, I've done quite a few more than that because there are so many to write about, but basically one a week and the occasional feature if a movie shoots here or something like that.
And so you work for the Star-Tribune, do they tell you what movie you have to review? Or are they like, hey, we got to have a review of the new Marvel movie because that's what people want to review or read, rather? Or do you get some say?
I would say I decide in collaboration with my editor, but there definitely are a fair amount of them that it just is pretty much, I mean, like, of course I was going to write about Jurassic Park Dominion this week. Sure. And of course I'm doing Lightyear next week. So some of them are pretty much slam dunks, but every once in a while there's a week where there isn't, an obvious blockbuster, or the blockbuster in quotation marks doesn't seem very interesting. So I'll do something else. I guess I did Fire Island for June 3rd, in fact, and that is a slightly more off the beaten path.
Sure.
So, yeah.
So I got to ask, you worked in St. Paul, Minneapolis. St. Paul's the superior city, right? Is that correct? Am I correct in saying that? Or?
Oh, boy, I don't know.
I'm from St. Paul, so that's why I brought it.
Ah, okay.
And I used to live in Minneapolis, and I loved the Minneapolis-St. Paul feud. It was very, very fun. Both sides of that. I'm not from Minnesota originally, so I was going to try to spin this the other way. Oh, you went to the Star-Tribune because you realized Minneapolis is superior to St. Paul, and that's why you left the Pioneer Press. But you don't have to have an official opinion on the record.
Yeah, we don't want you to isolate your audience. It's okay.
I mean, I've worked in both. I've always actually lived in Minneapolis, but I like them both. They complement each other nicely. How about that?
That's fair. That's very political. I had a quick question. So Rotten Tomatoes, you're a Rotten Tomatoes approved critic. If you go on Rotten Tomatoes, we see your reviews. You're listed as a top critic, which I think is pretty cool. There's like a special category you can read just top critics. Do you know like how did that come to be? How did you become a top critic? Was it something you had anything to do with?
The whole thing is very mysterious. I had nothing to do with it. For a long time, I remember thinking, gosh, I wonder why I'm not a Rotten Tomatoes top critic, because when I was at the Pioneer Press, I reviewed literally everything that opened. So sometimes, 7-8 movies a week.
Wow. Okay.
And I always kind of felt like, I doubt if there are too many people who are doing that. And at the time I was not listed as a top critic, but then mysteriously somehow I was. It may have had to do with moving to the Star Tribune, which is a bigger paper, or actually, no, I think it happened before that. And periodically, really the only contact I have with Rotten Tomatoes, and this is actually kind of good, is that they're fairly rigorous about the, I don't know even what you call the hit or miss icons that they use, the splatted tomato and the fresh tomato. Oh, that's what it is, fresh or rotten. Yeah. Every once in a while, if they read a review and they're like it's somewhere on the borderline and they're unclear about which it should be listed as, they'll shoot me an email and say, hey, is this, that, or that? Which is nice because it feels like they're paying attention anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you're in such select company, like the A.O. Scotts and the Peter Travers and the Richard Roperts, like that. You're up and with that group. It's pretty impressive. I was super impressed to see that.
It may be longevity is what got me there.
Well, so I guess you've been reviewing movies for a long time, which frankly is the dream, and I'm very jealous.
True.
You've seen a lot of movies. You saw a lot of movies that came out long ago. Have you ever had a review where you've come back later and you think, oh man, I kind of got that wrong or I missed that? Are there any ones where you've had second thoughts in retrospect, like, okay, now revisiting this, I'm wrong? I know like Roger Ebert famously was Blue Velvet. He didn't like it at first and they really came around eventually. Any of those that you've had?
I haven't had anything as dramatic as that. I'm sure I've had some where, like, over time I would maybe think I could have given it a half or a star more than I did. I do have a somewhat similar story in that vein, which was a little bit of a dilemma I had when I was writing a review, and this is quite a while ago. I would guess late 90s. There was a movie called, I think it was called The Wedding Gift. It was a kind of small British movie. It starred Julie Walters, who played a woman who I want to say has ALS, and the titular wedding gift is that she wants to live and be healthy long enough to walk her son down the aisle at his wedding. So they did a screening of it like 3 weeks or so before it was going to open here, and I went and did not like it at all. I thought it was, basically just the Disease of the Week movie that my description just now made it sound like it was. Sure. And it seemed cliched, and the acting was fine or whatever, but I just did not like it at all. Weirdly, there ended up being another screening of the movie, and my sister happened to be visiting when the second screening happened, and she was interested in it. So although I'd already seen it, we went to it, and it was the rare, in fact, maybe only time I've ever seen a movie twice before it came out.
Oh, yeah.
Second time, loved it. Probably because I was familiar with all of the things that I thought were wrong with it, and I could kind of set them aside and concentrate on the fact that Julie Walters is genuinely great in the movie, and it actually does have some really smartly observed moments along the way. And anyway, I was able to see the stuff that worked the second time that I had not necessarily attended to the first time, and then I really had a dilemma when I wrote my review, because what do I say? Go to it once, you'll hate it, then go again, you'll love it. And I can't even remember how I solved that dilemma. I think I did fess up that I had seen it twice and had very differing reactions. But so that does make me wonder if there might be times when a revisiting of a movie would make me like it more or potentially less. But for the most part, it makes sense to review based on seeing a movie once, because that's the experience that readers and viewers are going to have anyway.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I do like the concept that you're inoculated to kind of the stuff that didn't work the second time, so then you can kind of enjoy the parts that do a little bit more focus on it. That's really
anyway. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, no, that's good. So yeah, I was reading your summer movie preview, and this is an aside. I can't remember the last time I was this excited for a group of summer movies, and I think some of this is just pandemic theater withdrawal. Sure. And I, little kids, so I don't get to go out to the theater all that much, but we're gobsmacked, and I was just kind of looking and getting hyped from trailers, and then reading it. And in it, you made a claim that I loved. It was super fascinating. You said Mad Max Fury Road is the best movie of the 21st century, and I'm certainly not trying to get you to account for every position you ever had, but this fascinates. It's my favorite action movie of the 21st century. But you think there's not been a better movie made in the 21st century than Mad Max Fury Road? Is that?
I mean, I will entertain candidates if you have some, but yeah, I sure can't think of one. I think I did at some point for the paper a list maybe this would have been in 2020 when we were looking back at a couple of decades or something, a list of, I don't know, the 10 best movies of the century so far.
Sure.
And yeah, to me at least, that was the pretty clear, just, the craft of it and how exciting it is and how innovative it feels, despite the fact that it's a sequel. And, George Miller probably could have phoned it in. I just think as pure cinema, that movie is a masterpiece.
I mean, it's funny because we have so many legacy sequels now, like Top Gun Maverick just came out, and Fury Road was like really one of the first ones to do it really well. I think Creed does it really well, but yeah, I mean, to pick up from a story that's, I don't know, at that point was 20 years old, like, it's such an amazing accomplishment. Are you?
And maybe. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, are you excited for the Furiosa? Do you have any thoughts on that? I know I think they're filming it right now or whatever, but.
I am. I mean, it depends a little bit on what his exact involvement is in it. Sure. But yeah, I mean, based on that movie alone, I'm definitely going to want to see whatever he comes up with. And I think maybe part of the appeal of the most recent one was that it's a sequel sort of, but it really isn't a sequel. I mean, he kind of pretty much starts from scratch in terms of characters. The vibe is sequelish, I guess, but other than that, it's pretty fresh and to me feels it.
Oh yeah, it's very inventive. It's the best action movie of the 21st century. I couldn't think of one that I like better than that. I mean, I can throw a bunch of movies out that you can shoot down. I mean, I like Her quite a lot. I'm certainly a Paul Thomas Anderson fan, and I could pluck some of his movies, but it's great. I mean, everything you've said about it so far, I totally agree. I've seen it 3 times, and it's incredibly fun and great to look at, and just.
Have you seen the black and white version?
There's a black and white. No, I didn't even know that. Such a thing
is it
existed.
Chrome? The Chrome version? Yeah.
No, I've not. I guess I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, George Miller actually thinks it's better. I don't know if I agree with that, but it's really interesting to watch. It makes a huge difference visually. I mean, obviously it does, but those dust storm scenes in particular are pretty cool to watch that way.
Oh yeah, so I do think I would miss some of the colors. I like the colors and the bizarre guitar playing that's like ejaculating fire, and their rhyme is just like it's a wonderfully absurd, but also realized and plausible with everything. I mean, the world building is also great without missing it. It's just awesome. But I'm glad that you actually meant it. I do respect that. Yeah, you threw that in there, and that's your claim. I mean, again, I love it. So any praise for Mad Max Fury Road, I'm all for. So I loved it. I love that movie. I didn't expect to read just a random one-off sentence about how great Mad Max Fury Road was, but
I was probably trying to be a little rabble-rousing.
Oh, sure. That's got to do a little bit of that to try to get a little bit of attention. That's just how it goes. But I'm glad you actually meant it.
But yeah, so we're here today to talk, not Fury Road, we're here to talk Blowout. So I reached out to Chris, asked him to join. He said he would. Said pick any movie that you'd like, and you picked Blowout. So why did you pick this film, the De Palma film Blowout?
Well, I figured it was a movie that you were not apt to have already discussed. Like if I picked, I don't know, Casablanca or The Godfather or whatever, those seemed like ones that you might have already tackled. And also, it is my favorite movie of all time. There was some meme going around maybe 6 or 8 years ago where people were asked to name their 100 favorite movies. in order. And so I did. And, for the top 3 or 4 slots, there are certainly a bunch of contenders. But Blowout's always the movie that springs to mind immediately. I think partly because it came out, for me, in that period when you're apt to be most passionate about movies. And I happened to be at the time taking a bunch of film classes, and I was in college at the time. It came out in 1981. So it has lingered with me, and I revisit it often, and it has held up for me. So it seemed like kind of a slam dunk.
I was going to jump in. I've never seen it. I'm really glad you picked it. This is why one of the many reasons why we love having guests is I don't know that I would have ever picked it. I've never seen it before, and I'm really glad I watched it. There's a lot of super interesting stuff going on in it. So no, I'm just all I'm saying is I'm excited to talk about it. It was a great choice. I've got weird gaps with Brian De Palma and me. I mean, I've seen a lot of the big stuff. I've seen Carrie, of course. I've seen Scarface. I love Mission Impossible. I was 12 when that came out. But then after that, there's just not a lot else. I haven't delved into Brian De Palma very much. This is a good reason to do it. It's like homework, but really, really fun homework.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there. For a while, I would have said he was my favorite filmmaker, and I don't know if I'd say that anymore, partly because he's made a couple of duds lately. But that period when he was kind of in his golden or imperial or whatever you want to call it phase coincided with when I was in high school and college, and so it was always exciting to wait for the next De Palma in that period. And it also happened to be when Pauline Kael was still writing for The New Yorker, and she was a big fan of his, and I'm sure I read her as a probably preteen, but definitely teenager in my orthodontist waiting room. So I'm sure she helped turn me on to his skill and what's exciting about the way he makes movies. And she's legendarily a huge Blowout fan.
Absolutely. Yeah, this movie's the same sort of Ben. I had seen it before. I think I watched it right in the beginning of the pandemic. From what I recall, it was always on a list of movies I wanted to see, and it was hard to get your hands on, streaming-wise, up until the last maybe 2-3 years ago. It just wasn't on any of the streamers. You couldn't rent it, I think, for the longest time either. But yeah, so this is the second time I'd seen it. Really loved it. Had you seen the Antonioni movie Blow Up before? Because it's sort of based off of that, correct?
Well, it definitely borrows some things from that and from Watergate and really all of those 1970s conspiracy thrillers, which happens to probably be my favorite genre of movie too, like movies like Parallax View and The Conversation and All the President's Men and 3 Days of the Condor. It's very much, even though it just barely is in the 80s, it's very much one of those kind of 70s-ish movies. And I think all of them probably were influenced by Antonioni too. But I like Blowout much more than I like Blow Up.
Yeah, I've heard Blow Up is more like a photographer, right? Taking pictures and then photographing sort of this murder or scene that they shouldn't have been viewing.
He's doing a fashion shoot.
Okay.
And he thinks he sees something in the background of one of the images, and we spend kind of most of the movie wondering if that's true or not. In the case of Blow Up, he's recording audio and thinks he hears something, and pretty quickly we know he did in fact hear something, and the story takes off from there.
Well, this is a weird observation I'm going to start off with, but so I saw this, and there's a lot going on, and I see why a lot of film critics love it, because in part it's very much about movies. I mean, I love the sort of B plot where they're shooting the thriller, and they can't find the right scream for this very schlocky, slasher that John Travolta is helping to make. But as I was watching him, literally link the magnetic, try to sync the sound with the image, I was reminded of when I learned, it's something I should have known a lot earlier in life, but audio is recorded separately from the visual images, and they have to be linked and synced together. I remember finding that out, 10, 15 years ago. And seeing them spliced together, there was just something magical about it. And I got this weird impulse to split it. I want to listen to it without watching it once, and I want to watch it without hearing it, and then rewatch the movie. I got this weird impulse, and I can't articulate it. I don't have anywhere to go with it. I just know that I've never had that impulse with a movie before.
Well, and I love how they talk the sound effects too, because that's such a big part of filmmaking. Where they aren't capturing all those sounds always, like a door shutting or a screech. That has to be created afterwards, and added into the movie. And, Travolta has this whole closet full of all these different sound effects that he's built in. Yeah, we've used that wind before. That was the sort of trigger for the whole movie, is the director said he didn't like the wind, so Travolta had to go capture wind. And that, that has to be created somewhere. Now it's all digital in a computer somewhere. But I love how this movie just has that appreciation for like sound mixing and sound editing, and to build this whole thriller around it. It's really amazing.
Well, and one thing that happens with that movie within a movie thing that Ben is mentioning is that, to me, is really thrilling, is it makes the movie almost like a magic act where the magician is telling you all the way through how he's doing it. And somehow the fact that how it's working makes it even more exciting. Because like De Palma is essentially from the very first thing in the movie, which is a parody of a bad 70s slasher movie, he's saying, okay, here's the way I'm going to try to manipulate you in this movie. Just to let you know, I'm going to be doing this, this, and this, and this. And then he does this, and this, and it works. It doesn't matter that it's coming. It actually is even more exciting that you knew what was coming, and it does come, and it totally dazzles you. Me, anyway.
He's also still, like, making fun of himself a bit, too, with, like, Carrie kind of opens in a really similar way. And you can kind of feel that he's sort of poking fun at that, girls in a locker room, that whole, like, slasher kind of genre in his own movie.
It's the most sorority house
ever.
I think he's kind of, at the time he had sort of a reputation, and maybe still lingering reputation, of being a bit of a misogynist, which I do not think is true at all, and of making movies that were violent in order to shock us. And he, I think, would always have argued that was not what he was doing. But in a way, with that scene, he's like saying to his critics, okay, here's what you think I do. It's not what I do, but I'll do it to show you that it's not what I do.
Yeah, there is something satirical about
that opening sequence where like there's this goofy looking murder we get one glimpse of in the mirror, and nobody seems to notice him, and it's like cartoonish and silly and fabricated. And then we see the actual movie afterwards, and it is quite a contrast. Like, here's the fake movie you think I'm actually making. Here's the real one. That's a really interesting way of looking at it.
And it sets up the real one, because the problem with that movie, with the slasher movie within a movie that we see at the very beginning of the movie, that the movie then addresses, is John Travolta, the sound man, has to get a better scream.
Right.
For the woman in a shower, I think it is, who gets stabbed. And then he spends a good chunk of the movie getting that scream. And I mean, I don't think we want to give away too much here, but that leads us to, and here's another of these pronouncements that you maybe are going to think are too much, Ben, but I think the best ending of any movie ever. That finale is just devastating.
So, no, I don't know if it's the
best ever. I'm always, Eric knows, I'm very reticent of the grandiose claims. I won't necessarily follow you to the best ever, because that's something I'd have to really think about.
Ben doesn't have the courage in his convictions that you have, Chris.
I prefer to actually mean what I say, and I don't know if I'd mean it. I want to jump on the excitement, but I don't know if I actually mean that. I love the ending, though. I'm usually one that wants the ending to be more cynical and dour. This, without getting into details, kind of delivers that. And this is something I've never seen in a movie before, really, or maybe I haven't, I don't remember, but when he's in the van or whatever, driving through the parade, I don't think I've seen anything that's insane. It's like The French Connection, but crazier. We oftentimes see regular people in movies in extraordinary circumstances trying to figure stuff out, and they oftentimes come up on top. But in that moment, he seems to like lose his mind. He has like no plan, and then it's just fantastic. Visually, it's fantastic, and also he just doesn't seem to know what to do, and he just like panics and goes crazy. I mean,
and then in a way it feels more kind of, I mean, not that there's anything really realistic about the movie, but it feels kind of more realistic, because it's not like that chase scene ends in triumph for him. He crashes and
he careens into a storefront. It's clear, like, what was even his goal? I mean, I know he wants to get to the next station or whatever, but he's got no plan. He doesn't think at all. It's just clear, like, terror and panic have overridden his rational brain, and he's just driving insanely. In a scene that looks like incredibly difficult to shoot, right? I mean, this is no CGI. I mean, just the orchestration of the sequence of shots, him driving through it looks fantastic.
Yeah, that's another very pure. I mean, the whole movie is very purely cinematic, I think. And if I can mention, that scene in particular, but honestly, the whole movie is beautifully scored by Pino Donaggio. The score of the movie, I think, can read to people watching it for the first time now as like too much, because it is sort of an old-fashioned kind of lush romantic type of score, but I love that musical score.
Yeah, when he's running through the crowd, the fireworks are going off, like the score that you hear, it's pretty moving. It really is. And I mean, I've seen it before, so I knew like obviously what was going to happen, but it's a perfect like score matching the scene.
Yeah, that love theme, I think that cut is called Jack and Sally. That love theme is beautiful.
So I'm trying to figure out how to
phrase a question without doing spoilers. I don't know if we want to do spoilers, but
I mean, the movie's been out since '81. I think we can probably spoil it, right? Or no?
You guys' call. I'm trying to.
Well, we usually get into spoiler territory.
Yeah. If you haven't seen the movie, go see it. But yeah, we're going to talk about it.
Not to get to our letterbox, but it's very much worth watching. You won't be bored. There's a lot of great things going on in the movie. I guess here's just a motif. This is me. So for you, Chris, as somebody who's seen this movie a lot, and I don't have time to really get into a shot, but like one of the things I didn't expect in this movie was there's a lot of shots of like, and it's shot in Philadelphia. You see Benjamin Franklin all the time, and it's celebrating whatever it is, the 4th of July or whatever it is, or the Liberty Bell is what they're celebrating. And there's a critique I can't quite lay my finger on, but we're seeing a lot of like, here's the source of the founding fathers and the creation of the country, but then it's slimy and gritty and miserable, because what drives the plot is we have somebody that works for a politician essentially murders another politician. And there's something about the grime and the nastiness contrasted with this celebratory images of the founding of our nation, which really worked for me. Just seemed to like linger on Benjamin Franklin and this sort of concept. And I don't know if you think there's anything there, if that's something you've thought about in more detail. But
I do. I mean, one time when I watched it, and I've probably seen it, I don't know, 30 times by now, but one time when I watched it specifically to see if De Palma includes red, white, and blue in every single shot in the movie. Ooh. And it's not always like the true red of the flag, for instance, but I think red, white, and blue is literally in every shot in the movie. And that to me is kind of underscoring that connection to those Watergate influenced conspiracy thrillers, this idea that, we think we live in the land of liberty, the Philadelphia City of Liberty. And in fact, there's this kind of shadow government behind the scenes that we are only dimly or not at all aware of, that is calling a lot of the shots for us. And the little guy who tries to do the right thing ends up paying for it.
Yeah, I think the movie's overwhelmingly political. There's all of those. I mean, he's a candidate for president that gets killed, and I mean the Chappaquiddick stuff too. Like that was always in the back of my mind too. It was like, wow, that's so much like the Ted Kennedy situation, basically recreating it in this movie. Although it's kind of flipped in this version because Travolta saves Nancy Allen, right? But yeah, I think there's all those political undertones throughout the whole movie. I don't think he's subtle about it really either.
No, and we haven't mentioned John Lithgow yet, but that performance is kind of the, I don't know, G. Gordon Liddy or whatever operative who's behind the scenes is so good.
He has lost his mind. And Lithgow, so like I remember Lithgow from Third Rock from the Sun, like as the dad. I mean, I know he was the bad guy in like Cliffhanger, but seeing him in this movie is like, he's a lunatic. He's like psychotic in this movie. It's insane.
Well, yes,
he's got a lot of different notes. In season 4 of Dexter, which is the last season of Dexter worth watching, he plays a serial killer, and he's really scary and good there. So I've seen him hit this kind of notes before, but yes.
Ricochet, too, that's the Denzel Washington movie. If you've seen that, he's off his rocker in that, too. But this movie, he is insane.
And he's even more bananas in another Brian De Palma movie, Raising Cain, which is really underrated and totally worth seeing. But yeah, the scene in this movie where, so he plays this guy who's unclear who he's connected to in the government, or if in fact he's just sort of become a lone wolf who's doing whatever he wants to do. But he's somehow connected to this assassination of a politician that John Travolta is investigating. And that scene where he's on the phone pretending to be distraught and yet his face is completely impassive because he is a sort of a monster who doesn't really have any emotional connection. Anything that's going on apparently is just so beautifully done. It's almost like he's acting two characters at once.
Yeah, he's one hand admitting to be a serial killer, that he killed this woman, and at the other hand, he's like watching Travolta as like this sort of operative. It's really amazing.
And he is a full-on sociopath.
I mean, his plan is, he was basically going rogue, and he's got to do, so he had to kill the presidential candidate. He had to, and then also kill two other women who aren't Nancy Allen to create this MO so that it would look like Nancy Allen was just killed by this guy who's an MO, which is a really elaborate, ridiculous plan, really. So it's kind of like, hey, yeah, he just wanted to do this. Really, he just needed an excuse to do this because nobody else wanted him to do this. They shot down his plan, and it's just full-on crazy.
Well, and the other thing is he's kind of the classic, it's maybe sometimes scarier not to tell us why character too, because I don't think he ever expresses any political views, and we don't really have a sense that he's doing this because he believes strongly in anything. He just, this is his job, and so he does all this awful stuff.
He's Michael Myers, right? He's just killing people, for really no reason. So we talked about her, Nancy Allen, right? She is actually my least favorite part of this movie.
Really?
Yeah.
It's John
Travolta by a mile.
Nancy Allen, I don't know. I mean, again, maybe this is just me. Maybe I'm missing it. But boy, does she seem not a real person in this movie. The way she talks, everything she does. Oh boy, they'll put the makeup on.
She feels like a movie character.
Yeah,
that's fine.
That's just me. Maybe I'm wrong, Chris. It sounds like maybe you disagree.
I do disagree. I would agree with you that she really swings for the fences in the performance as this kind of, naive, probably not super smart or at least not super educated woman who gets sort of wrapped up in all this. But I don't know. I think the choices she makes are really, really interesting, and particularly when we, get to the ending of the movie and know her fate, make her innocence even more moving and have a bigger impact because she has gone so big. But I can see what you're saying. It's a lot.
Like when we first see her and she's at the hospital and she's kind of dazed, I'm like, is she what is wrong? Like, is she drunk? Is she on drugs? Is she just concussed? I was just so confused what was going on in her head.
I mean, I would say she probably is concussed, and I do think that's part of what's going on in the performance is that she's never really treated for whatever happened to her when she almost died. But yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if she, the character was pretending to be dumb, a la a Marilyn Monroe character. I got that vibe at first. And then it turns out, no, she just really didn't get it by the end. And it took her a long time to realize even she was in danger. She goes a long way with John Lithgow on the train before it clicks. Okay, this is horribly wrong. So I was a little unsure at first, but if we're going to talk performances, I don't love John Travolta.
Oh, I completely disagree with you. I think he's amazing in this movie. He's a movie star.
I'm with you.
Oh, see, I had trouble blind. He's this sound tech nerd. I think he's too much of a star. I see him and think, I think of Grease and I think of, Saturday Night Fever, and I think, man, I don't buy you as this just tech nerd who is pulling things apart and putting them back together and learning sound from the ground up.
We literally see him do it. I mean, he's doing the skill, which I think is so cool because we're watching him do this insanely difficult skill, and I believe every second of it.
So point me to the scene where he's actually doing it, him being John Travolta. He's actually doing the whole process.
When the credits roll, when we're in his sound room and he's cutting all the sound together, we're watching him build the sound sequence for the movie.
There's that you're talking about the scene where he assembles essentially almost like a Zapruder film of the crash, right? And there's also the scene earlier in the movie where he actually goes out and gets the recording, which I think is so amazingly shot with the split diopters and split screen stuff, where he's using the microphone to kind of direct the sound and point to where the sound is. And you kind of see, to me at least, on his face, his instinct for how sound works. And I don't know. I think De Palma does a great job of setting up that that he's an expert in this field that we
Yeah,
don't.
the problem
really
isn't the direction, and it's not De Palma, and maybe it's just me and me knowing who John Travolta is. I never bought him as the character. I guess I didn't see a scene where it was literally John Travolta's body carefully doing all the steps. I mean, we see hands doing steps all the time.
When he goes in the animation room and he builds takes the pictures and he turns each shot and then has the audio matchup, that's like you're watching him do it. I don't know. I believe every
Was it
second.
actually him? Oh, because I don't know. I guess I assumed for all the technical stuff it wasn't him, but I wasn't paying enough attention, and it's entirely possible that they're like, hey, here's how to do it, and here you
So
how to do it.
you're saying a sound guy wouldn't be that good looking and that charismatic? Is that the problem?
And I also didn't believe the emotions. I mean, I guess I don't think Travolta's that great of an actor. I mean, I know Quentin Tarantino loves him. I don't love John Travolta as an actor nearly that much. I don't feel sold on him as the character. I feel like he's a guy reading lines somewhat convincingly, but I just was never fully like, oh yeah, that's a sound guy. That's a guy who really knows how to put together wires and mic things up and mix the sound in and do the Foley artist stuff of pulling. I never quite got all that. That's me. Maybe it's just me.
The movie also shows him in a flashback as a guy who didn't know how to do all that stuff and learned a really tough lesson as a result of that.
Sure.
So we might have to agree to disagree on this.
Oh, it's fine. And it's not, I mean, to me, I think you could have put a lot of different people in that role and it would have worked just as well because the direction is so good. I mean, this is absolutely a John Travolta problem and maybe just a Ben Lewis problem and not a real problem.
Chris, you mentioned, is it the split Doppler? Because that's like a De Palma signature, right? Like where he's recording it and you see the owl in like the foreground and then you see Travolta. Oh man, I love the way that looks. So is that what split Doppler?
Split diopter, it's called. Yeah, it's where two things that should not really be in focus are shot separately and then edited together to look like they're in the same frame. He does it a lot. Femme Fatale is probably the movie where he does it the most. Another underrated Brian De Palma movie, by the way. But yeah, he does that a lot, and he also does split screen a lot. He does all of the tricks in this movie, basically. The other thing we haven't talked about is the amazing scene when Travolta... the bad guys have erased all of the stuff in his studio, and he goes back to his studio, and the camera does a 360 for, I don't know how long it is, but somehow it's so carefully choreographed that we see everything we need to see while the camera is spinning around and around in this room and apparently representing the unrest in Travolta's mind as he realized that somebody has gotten to him. And
one of the coolest scenes in movie history, I think. And then not just this, but the sound is also, because I have a little surround sound set up, and the sound is kind of following where the cameras spin. It's absolutely incredible.
No, there are tons of these amazing shots.
YouTube that scene if you haven't seen. Just go. You got to rewatch that on YouTube.
There's not a single shot in this movie that I don't love. And then when you will go and the camera will move to the ceiling and kind of pull away and look on top. It's such an interesting, weird choice that could be distracting, but it's not. It really heightens what happens in a way.
Yeah, it always feels like there's a reason for it. He's not just showing off, although he is showing off.
Yeah, he is. And this is a movie where it could easily seem like somebody was over-directing. That's in quotes. I don't know if that's a real term. But it is. I mean, there's a lot going on, but it works really well, and it makes the movie better instead of just being an annoying distraction. Sorry. Oh,
no, my fault. Another thing that I think is really cool, and that I don't think I noticed until I watched it a couple of times, is, and I love this about the best directors, is that De Palma basically announces from the very beginning of the movie what sort of movie it's going to be, not just with the parody slasher film, but also, I don't know if you guys noticed the very, very brief opening credit sequence where there's like I don't know what you call the thing that registers sound.
The decibel level, yeah.
The decibel level thing, yeah. There's like the waving back and forth arm, and as it waves back and forth and we hear the decibels, the little sound bites we hear almost tell you the entire story of the movie in very brief, like 1 or 2 second little splits.
I did not catch that.
Definitely did not
notice that. There's a car crash, and there's a Nancy Allen scream, and he practically distills the movie down into like a 15-second audio clip.
Yeah, incredible. So the ending, I mean, we can, I guess, spoil it now. We've sort of danced around it, but he's trying to record audio for this horror movie. The scream doesn't work. The director doesn't like it. He says he'll get the scream. Nancy Allen gets killed by Lithgow, and that's the scream that he records. And plays it back to the director. The director loves it, and then he obviously is tormented by it. I read something on Wikipedia that the ending is like one of the things that people hated about it when it was originally released, because like it's so obviously so dark and depressing.
It's not a crowd-pleasing ending.
No.
Yeah.
There's just not a lot of movies that end with just such a bummer of an ending. It's pretty
so
shocking.
Cynical. It's wonderfully cynical.
It is bleak. I mean, it's not just your government is corrupt. You can't do anything about it. The people you love are going to die. Oh, and by the way, you're going to be so apparently dedicated to your job that you can't help but profit from the fact that the people you love have died.
Yep.
Like, how does he go on from this movie? There could never have been another movie, a blowout sequel.
They get away with it. You know, I mean, that's the other thing is like you see, obviously it's this murder is the person that he was falling for dies, but like the political organization or whoever was behind the murder of a presidential candidate just like got away with it. It's crazy.
Yeah, which, you know, potentially has happened. I mean, Teddy Kennedy got away with Chappaquiddick.
Yeah, I don't know. The cynicism is true to life for sure. And we mentioned sound, but it's such an incredible thing, right? Most of the evidence is audio for John Travolta's character. He's got recordings. He's got to sync it. Just the way that sound impacts everything. I love the moment. John Travolta had this plan that is really harebrained, really, if you think about it. He wires up Nancy Allen, and she's going to go give the tape to the guy she thinks is a newscaster. But she doesn't watch the news, so she doesn't know who it is, and we know it's John Lithgow, the sociopath who's doing it. He's going to wire her up and then follow her if something goes wrong or somebody tries to take it or not acknowledge it. And John Lithgow immediately takes her to the subway and takes her across. Well, he's going to try to kill her in the subway first. Then he takes her in the train and takes her somewhere else downtown. John Travolta starts to realize something's wrong. He's sprinting after him. It's just like desperate. He's trying to get to him. And he's getting to the train. The train's about to pull away. We hear him yell, but it's muted because she's in a train. She can't hear him. Just like, oh, the power of sound and communication. It's just gets muted, and it's so easy to get wrong. And this is after he's already not been able to get a call from the newscaster because John Lithgow, sent the circuit the wrong way or sent a busy signal. However he did that. I mean, I don't know the exact technical way he did that. It's just such a powerful thing in the movie. It's all about sound, and it's great. I love that was so crucial constantly throughout the movie.
And it relates to that earlier scene too, where again De Palma kind of tells us ahead of time what's going on. We see that flashback where Travolta wired up somebody for I guess it was an FBI tap of the mob or something, if I remember right. And Travolta screws it up, and the guy ends up dying as a result of it. And then Travolta does it again.
Right.
And
he doesn't get redemption,
ends up
though.
dying as a result of it.
Yep. You think he's going to get redemption. He's going to do it right this time. And nope. Nope.
I mean, he's the hero of the movie, but there's certainly a way to read it that he's the bad guy in the movie. It's definitely his fault that Nancy Allen dies.
Oh, yeah. He pushes her. She's going to leave town and go lay low for a while, which would have been best for her.
Well, and he uses her as bait too. Really, he's like, we'll strap your thing. We'll catch these people, and she ends.
Even though I've done it before and it hasn't worked,
right.
It's gonna work this time.
That guy died too. That scene. So you mentioned the subway scene. It reminded me a lot. I guess De Palma must pull from this. So like the Untouchables scene where they're in the station, and the carriage is falling down the steps. A lot like that. And even in Carlito's Way, there's the subway scene. He really has such a cool way of the like climactic end of the third act. All of those movies have this like really intense climax that, I don't know, did he develop it with this movie, or is it just his style throughout his career?
I think his style throughout his career, he always has been really good at the geography of spaces and finding interesting ways to use them. Like that Union Station or whatever it is in Philadelphia, the way he uses that space is just so fascinating. Those long shots of Travolta walking between those concrete kind of poles with the light coming in behind him, and the way he uses those phone booths and the bath, like he makes use of every single element of that place. Oh, yeah. And by the end you feel like, okay, I know exactly where everything is, which makes it so much more fun to watch a scene when you're oriented like that.
It's really my major criticism of modern movies, that the use of space, like where you are, you feel like you're in a real location. Now everything's just a screen, and nobody's even in the same room.
It's a CGI problem.
Yeah, it's a CGI problem for sure.
And over editing, I think too, which De Palma does not do. He's obviously, here comes another mention of an underrated De Palma movie, sure. Snake Eyes. But almost all of his movies have one of those shots where we follow in real time a character for, like Angie Dickinson in Dressed to Kill is another one, for up to like 10 minutes. And it makes you trust him as a filmmaker because you're like, oh, the guy's showing me everything. He's not editing away or cutting stuff out. And of course, he isn't showing you everything, and he's manipulating you.
Yeah, I mean, Eric, I know. Yeah, I don't.
I know. Well, we're talking to one of the biggest Brian De Palma fans I probably ever met. But I know the stroller down the stairs scene. He took that from the Battleship Potemkin, which is a Sergei Eisenstein movie. I mean, he's admitted this. It's a propaganda communist film by this filmmaker from the 1920s, where that happens, where there tries to be an uprising. And I think he's one of those guys that understands film history. I know Brian De Palma gets kind of knocked as a, Hitchcock acolyte, and I get that a little bit. Sometimes I got like a Hitchcock by way of the subway sewer or something. Like I get a little bit of the grime. But I just think he seems like a guy that finds what people have done before him and has figured out ways to contextualize it with his own style, which is, I think, really the sign of a lot of great filmmakers is what's come before and you pay reference, but then you recontextualize it and make it awesome. I don't know about specific with this one, but I mean, I love the sense of place as well. It feels real. You know what's happening. You know the stakes at all times.
But De Palma hasn't even made like a musical too? Like the guy can do any kind of film. We're talking Mission Impossible is a De Palma movie. It's insane.
Franchise. I don't know if he's done a musical.
That would be news to me, but you can enlighten us, Chris, if he has.
He kind of did a musical, The Phantom of
The Paradise The Phantom of the
Paradise. Yeah, is a musical. And I think you're right that especially the Hitchcock comparison he used to got dinged on in this movie, he calls it Blowout, and it's quite clearly, at least in some way, inspired by Blowout. So it's not like he's pretending not to. But I think if he came along now and were making movies as exciting as the ones that he made in, say, the 70s and the 80s, that criticism wouldn't be happening, because now we're much more familiar with sample culture and how rap music repurposes earlier music and gives it fresh context. At the time, it seemed like, oh, he's an imitator or whatever. But now I think we would say, oh, he knows his film history and he is smart enough to use it in interesting ways. Like when he does repurpose stuff, Obsession, for instance, is practically a remake of Vertigo, but he totally makes it his own. So
sure.
Yeah.
And Tarantino, I mean, his whole career is that it repurposed De Palma to a certain extent, and nobody's really levied that criticism of him.
Yeah, and Tarantino, of course, is a big De Palma fan. Yeah, and Blowout specifically, I think it's one of his 10 favorite movies too, actually.
Yeah, man. Well, this is from the
trivia last week, but yeah, apparently that's one of his desert island movies. If he could only have 3 movies to watch for the rest of his life, this would be one of the 3.
Oh, wow.
About as high praise as you get, really.
It is very rewatchable, too. You find, or at least I find new stuff every time I watch it.
So I look forward to watching it again where I know what happens now. I mean, I kind of was able to tune out of the plot a little bit anyway. I mean, I was way more interested in the style than the substance of the plot, but I look forward to that even more, to like, all right, I can sit back and really know what's going to happen. And now I can really soak in all the little choices that are being made, and the ambiance and all the little details and all the craziness, and start thinking about, oh yeah, he had to shoot this and crazy ways for this big long take, and get that even more, because that gets really, really fun. So I look forward to that. Yeah, get to really revel in the style, and that I know how it plays out.
Performance-wise, we haven't mentioned Dennis Franz either, who I think is fantastic in the movie, as this sort of sleazy,
utter slimeball. Yeah, first-rate slimeball. He's got like 2 scenes.
Blackmailer, whatever you want to call him.
I love that when we see him, he's got the like tank top with the mustard stains on it, and he's in his apartment, and he's like trying to figure out a way to sit and look cool when Nancy Ellen shows up. It's like, what a sleazeball this guy! So perfect.
Yeah, and then let me seduce her with my mustard stains.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah. It is the pure archetype of, here's just like it's not New York because it's Philadelphia, but like a big city scumbag slime ball, just perfect. hits those notes.
The thing I didn't catch when I first saw it is like he's actually there when the car hits the water. He's the other guy. If you right in the beginning of the movie when Travolta jumps in, there's another guy behind him. And when I first saw the movie, I was like, wait, why don't we ever go back to that guy? And of course, it's Dennis Farina. He was there taking the pictures. But the first time I saw it, I didn't catch that he was standing right next to Travolta when he jumped in the water.
Yeah, and he planned for Nancy Allen to die in that scene.
Yeah, he expects her
to die. He didn't expect her to live, and then it was just happenstance that John Travolta was there. Yeah, no, it's great.
In that sense, John Travolta's the good guy in that he gives Nancy Allen 3 more days or something like that before the evil finishes her off. Well, talking about the bleaknesses of the movie, the other thing that I think is kind of interesting in the movie about it, now that I think about it, is the politician who does die in the Chappaquiddick scene. You could make this movie where he's this bright shining hope for the future of America, and he's, let's say, John Kennedy or whoever who can potentially turn things around for us. And the movie really doesn't do that either. I mean, he's potentially just as bad as anybody else. We don't know.
It's true. He takes a young woman
into a car that he doesn't know, and he's off to...
Well, and his advisor tries to cover it up. I mean, the guy that goes to the hospital, he's not trying to find the truth. He knows the truth. He's trying to cover the whole thing up.
Oh, I'm sorry to keep doing this, but there's another amazing performance. John McMartin is that advisor in the hospital who's kind of wheeling and dealing, and he has that great kind of oddly cloudy over voice. He was an actor who didn't make very many movies, actually, but the way he tries to sort of finesse that scene is so oily and awful.
And the cop too. Travolta's trying to tell the cop what happened, and the cop's just not. No, that's not what happened. He wouldn't listen to the whole story. So this movie doesn't really give police much of a shout out either.
Yeah, you put a lot of
good cops away. Well, presumably he put bad cops away. He was working with internal affairs to get corrupt cops off the street. So they probably weren't good cops. But yeah, the police chief guy didn't care.
Yeah, and in a way, I guess the movie is sort of arguing in the end that we wouldn't know the truth if we saw it.
Which is pretty prophetic with what, not to get too political, but what we've seen in the last few years in our current political system, where the truth of what's real, what's not, seems to be a fungible thing, which is pretty sad.
Yeah, that would give
this movie a lot of poignancy. I kept thinking oh yeah, this movie has got a lot to say still, even though this came out in 1981. I mean, this feels pretty prescient.
Yeah, it's weirdly both ahead of and behind its time. If it had come out 3 or 4 years earlier, it probably would have been done better at the theater. It was not a success in theaters, and it probably would have been because it would have been part of that whole 3 Days of the Condor wave. Or if it had come out later, it probably would have, survived past the point when De Palma was being dinged as a Hitchcock imitator, and back when he was in the Carlito's way, when his movies were being kind of reappraised. So it came out at exactly the wrong time, I guess, except for me.
If he saves her and they catch the bad guys, you think that changes the box office history of this movie?
Maybe, except, it didn't open well either, so it's not like word of mouth got out and people said, oh, it's a bummer, which, it is. I think, part of it is maybe what Ben sort of alluded to. It's probably not the movie that people wanted to see John Travolta in at the time. Even though I think he's great. And the reviews probably it didn't get great reviews. Pauline Kael loved it, but I don't know that her reviews necessarily translated to box office. And the other reviews, I think, did say it was kind of derivative, and people were sort of over De Palma at the time. I think it sort of hit a bunch of stuff. And also hadn't John Travolta just come off moment by moment, so he wasn't exactly at the peak of his career either.
He's about to be in the
downhill slide until Tarantino revives him, right? Isn't that where we're about to hit the 80s where his career struggles the most? I could be wrong.
I think Urban Cowboy is still to come.
Okay.
If I remember right. We'll have to look at the dates. But
sure.
But yeah, he's about to head into that period.
Interesting. It would have been a worse movie, Eric, if they changed the ending. Maybe it would have made a few more bucks, but if it ended happily, I wouldn't have believed it because it sets up such cynical misery the whole time for us to get hey, everything works out. It wouldn't work with the rest. I'm all fine with a political thriller that turns out happy and hey, it's Leonard Bernstein and they got the bad guy.
Nixon didn't get away with it. Yeah.
but that's a different movie, and you set that up differently, and it works differently. It's the movie just is steeped in cynicism and then gives you a happy dappy ending at the end. It just doesn't work tonally for me. You gotta have the courage of your conviction, which this movie did. I appreciated it. And this
it's much more like The Parallax View, which is similar. I don't know if you guys know that movie, but it's similarly bleak.
I've seen 3 Days of the Condor, which I recall ending somewhat happy. Not perfectly happy, but
he uncovers the conspiracy.
Yeah, and it gets conned out. I haven't seen Parallax View, but it's definitely on the ever always growing list of movies I need to see at some point. Because I like 3 Days of the Condor. I don't know that I like political thrillers as much as you do, but like a really good thriller is great. In the 70s, there's a lot of awesome movies in the 70s that.
Marathon Man's another one, right? Isn't that kind of in that same vein?
Yep. Less political maybe, but yeah, I would say that's in that same vein. But I highly recommend Parallax View, which is made by Alan J. Pakula, who also made All the President's Men.
Warren Beatty's the star of that, right?
Warren Beatty's essentially the John Travolta character in that, and things turn out about as well for him as they do for Travolta.
There's a big climax in like an auditorium, right? A big convention center in that movie.
There's one there. There are a couple of big set pieces. There's also one at the top of the Space Needle in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, that sounds incredible.
It's a really good movie. I definitely agree with you.
And it's another one that has a great score too. Actually, very very creepy.
Well, anything else to say about Blow Up before we move on to you just give a rating on it if you feel comfortable with that, Chris?
Well, whatever your top rating is what I give it. 5 out of 5 stars or
max
whatever.
Out. All right.
Yeah,
wonderful.
I figured if it's your favorite movie of all time, it's going to be 5 out of 5. If this isn't 5 out of 5, then I guess you just don't give 5 out of 5s, Gino.
I don't give many, but I would give this one that, yeah.
Sure. Okay. Eric, do you want to go next, or should I hop in?
I gave it 4.5. I actually, you mentioned the kind of changing how you reviewed it. So I look back at when I first reviewed it, same 4 to 5, and so it didn't change for me. I think it's really almost perfect. I don't so much like the dark, cynical endings as maybe Ben would understand.
Eric and I tend to disagree on endings a lot.
And I mentioned my Nancy Allen take. Maybe that's a bad take. I don't know. She kind of bugged me in this movie. So I guess I ding it a half star. So 4.5 is where I would put it.
For slightly different reasons, but I'm also to 4.5. And it's a movie. My opinion could definitely change a half star. It's really just the Ben Lewis doesn't love John Travolta tax, and maybe his performance would grow on me. I don't know. I feel like the direction's superb. It's not a problem. He doesn't make the movie bad or anything, but I don't feel like he makes the movie great either. It's just the direction's so incredible that it works really, really well in spite of John Travolta. And again, I could change my mind. I probably will enjoy it more a second time.
Who should be in it? Pick an actor then that you think would be better than Travolta.
See, this is if I'm I have to think about all the actors that were working in 1981 around
Warren Beatty or
it's got to be a younger person. Yeah, you definitely want to be somebody young who's working on really
Redford. Is Redford better in this? You think?
No, he's too big of a star for sure.
Too big of a star. Okay.
Well, the guy in the time period who always lost out to Travolta for roles is Richard Gere. So he certainly would have been a possibility.
That's interesting. Okay. I have to think about it. But
I would be fine if they just found some really to me, if they had some really no-name actor, I think Brian De Palma would have been able to get just as good a performance out of him. Or even if it was just some character actor that isn't a star, and he probably had to get a star to make the movie. I understand that there's limitations and studios want you to have stars so people will come and see the movie, but it might have worked better with the right sort of character actor in the lead. Because I don't think it needed a movie star. But again, this is really trivial. It's not even a problem. It's just I keep thinking, John Travolta, I don't know. And he's got his own weird quirks that I'm probably bringing in as well, which makes me not love him as a human being. But that's not the movie's fault. So anyway, it's incredible.
So Scientology, is that what you're bringing in? Like you didn't like him in '81 because of Scientology?
I didn't say anything about Scientology.
Well, you kind of insinuated.
You dinged Uncut Gems because Glenn Taylor ruined the Kevin Garnett situation.
That's
please.
the truth.
At the time, I will say that in 1981 we weren't as aware of other things about John Travolta as we are now. So it probably is hard to watch the movie without subsequent.
Again, if I see it a second time, I think
I don't care. John Travolta's great, or the movie's so good that John Travolta doesn't even matter. I mean, this is really, really a minor nitpick. Even though he's in the movie a lot, the direction is so wonderful all the time. It's great. So again, I could change my mind. I don't want to make it sound like it's a problem at all to anybody. You should see Blowout. It's great. It's on Amazon.
You're entitled to your bad take.
Thank you. I am. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're standing by it. That's one thing. You got the courage now. I like it.
Okay.
Okay, so next thing we play this game, this 5 Degree of Field of Dreams, kind of Kevin Bacon-y kind of game. Chris, do you want to participate, or should we just jump in and give ours? We really just use it as a chance to talk about some other movies. So.
Well, I don't know. I can think of one, but it might take us there too fast. So I don't know. You
That's
might not
cool.
like that.
That's the trick. That's
The problem is your brain wants to do it as efficiently as possible. I have that problem all the time. I'm like, oh no, I have to take a detour to get there.
Well,
Yeah.
I can just give mine if
Go for it, Eric.
if that's fine with you. So I went Blowout, stars Dennis Franz, who's just an animal in this movie.
It does star Dennis Franz for sure.
Or he's in it. It doesn't star him. So he's one of the sort of side characters. He's actually in a bunch of De Palma movies. What I tried to do was do all De Palma movies, and I got hung up on jumping from a De Palma movie to Field of Dreams. I couldn't do it. I spent like an hour trying to find an actor that's in a De Palma movie and also in Field of Dreams. Couldn't do it. So I had to take a little detour. But mostly De Palma movies. So Body Double also has Dennis Franz in it. Melanie Griffith is in that as well. She's in Bonfire's Vanities, which was, I guess, a huge bomb, right? De Palma bomb, didn't make any money. And then I had to take the detour. I took Tom Hanks. He's in Sleepless in Seattle with Gabby Hoffman, and she's in Field of Dreams. So I couldn't get all the De Palma movies, but I tried.
All right, I will jump in.
And so it bothered me. I had this problem, like, what do I know Nancy Allen from? Like, there's one movie in particular.
Oh, yeah.
It's really in. And then it was like, I had to look afterwards, like, oh, RoboCop.
RoboCop, for sure.
Yeah, Peter
RoboCop.
Waller's partner in RoboCop. Oh my gosh. Okay, that's who Nancy Allen is. Okay. I mean, I've seen her in other stuff too.
Say Carrie.
No, I haven't seen Carrie in a long time.
Also, Travolta's also in Carrie. Like De Palma worked with a lot of these people. Nancy Allen is in almost all of his movies.
Well, yeah,
They were married.
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
There you
I
go.
saw that and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes some sense. They were, yeah. But anyway, so I was like, all right, I want to go take a route to get to Nancy. Start with Nancy Allen, and Nancy Allen's in 1941, and I put that one in there mostly for Eric and I. We had dreams one day of possibly doing a great director bad movie podcast where we'd pick like the worst movie from director. And 1941 is by far Spielberg's worst movie. It's baffling and confusing. I don't get 1941. It's such a weird collection of scenes, and it just doesn't work. But Christopher Lee's in 1941. And Christopher Lee was in Airport 77. You know, the disaster trend was part of the 70s. That was the third one in the series. And it had some older stars in it, Jimmy Stewart and Joseph Cotton. Joseph Cotton was in Twilight's Last Gleaming with Burt Lancaster, a movie I've never seen, having to do with them trying to get the truth about how the U.S. government knew Vietnam was not going to work, but they were doing it anyway. They continued the war anyway, and there's a nuclear reactor involved. So it's kind of a weird political thriller. Also, but Burt Lancaster's in that. Burt Lancaster's in Field of Dreams. It's my route.
Mine was John Lithgow is in The Day After with Amy Madigan, who is in Field of Dreams. So mine goes way too quickly.
Yeah,
No, that's the way to do it. Super efficient. Okay, so last thing here, just kind of introducing what movie we'll be doing next week. This is a movie I picked, so no guest next week. But so I'll give basically 5 clues. If you know it, just shout out, Chris. I'm sure you'll probably get it. But here we go. So clue number 1, there's a reference to Tiger Woods in this movie.
Yeah.
Probably not going to do it. Number 2, The main character is a photographer in Brooklyn, New York. All right. Number 3. The film originally had a much darker ending than the one that was released theatrically.
No.
All right, number 4. The star of the film came to fame in a Black Mirror episode.
Pretty recent. I mean, we're doing one the last few years. I got nothing.
All right. Clue number 5. This maybe you'll give it away. I don't know. The writer-director won Best Original Screenplay for this movie at the Academy Awards.
At the most recent Academy Awards that featured the slap, or?
I think it was 2018.
Okay.
Gosh.
I'm stumped.
Yeah, me too. Oh, wait, would that have been Spike Lee? No.
The movie came out in 2017, but it was the 2018 Oscars.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I don't think I know.
Let me see if I can give another clue. There's a reference to a teacup. A teacup plays a big part in the movie.
Now I got it. I can't. Jordan Peele's first movie. I can't think of the name.
Get Out?
Get Out. There we go.
Get Out is correct. That's the movie we're doing next week. Jordan Peele's got another movie coming out. Nope. Comes out in July, so about the time that this will be airing when you're listening to this, Nope will probably be out, maybe almost coming out. So I thought it'd be great to revisit his first movie, Get Out. But that's it. Special thanks, Chris Hewitt, so much for joining. We really appreciate it. Anything else you want to chat about Blowout, about your work, about Get Out, about anything?
No, just I hope people will seek out Blowout and watch it, because it's even though it's one of those movies that a lot of people will say is their favorite movie, I still don't think it's a very well-known commodity, and it should be.
No, it's really not. I mean, I know my demographic. I don't know that in my circle of, I'm going to put this in quotes, movie geeks, I don't think this is one we watched or talked about or remember it being a big deal to anybody. And it feels like it should have been a bigger deal.
Yeah, I think I mentioned Amazon Prime is where I saw it, if you want to stream it.
If you have Prime, it's free to stream.
And if people, this will typecast me as older, but if people still like physical media, Criterion Collection has a great edition of it.
Are there any great bonus features on that, like behind-the-scenes things or anything like that?
There are a few bonus features. What would be great is if did you guys watch the Noah Baumbach De Palma documentary that's essentially just interviews with De Palma about his movies and clips to illustrate what he's talking about?
No, I've never even heard of that.
It's been on my list. I think was it on Netflix for a while, or maybe Amazon. It's on one of the streamers. It's been on my list to watch.
It's fascinating, and for the clips alone, actually, it's fascinating just to see him talking about what he was trying to do. And but anyway, I wish that were a bonus feature on this disc. It's not, unfortunately, but it could be your own bonus feature.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, super thanks.
Thank you,
so folks can find StarTribune.com. They can read your reviews. Rotten Tomatoes. Yep. Is there social media kind of place that folks should check you out as well?
My Twitter handle is Hewitt Strib, so HEWITTSTRIB. And that's it, I guess.
Yeah, so read Chris's reviews, check his stuff out. Amazing film critic, and we're super grateful that you joined us.
We're very lucky to have him. It was awesome.
It was nice to chat with you guys.
All right, well, everybody take it easy. Thanks again for listening, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.